polls closed, voters across Taiwan make their voices heard on contentious referendums. TaiwanPlus reporters dig deep into the issues on the ballot.
The construction of this LNG receiving terminal over the Datan Algal Reef in Taoyuan has become one of the most contentious issues in the country.
I'm Louise Watt in the district that's in the shadow of a nuclear power plant, which is a major topic in the referendum.
Are all these polls leading to voter fatigue? Is there such a thing as too much democracy? Good afternoon and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. It's referendum day in Taiwan, and people across the country have been voting on issues from pork imports and nuclear power to the future of an ancient algal reef. There was even a referendum on when to hold referendums. Leaders from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, and the opposition Kuomintang, or KMT, voted at stations across the country. The DPP urged people to vote no on the 4 referendums, while the KMT was looking for yes votes. We'll go into the details a bit later, but first, let's hear from TaiwanPlus reporter James Chater, who went down to the polling booths to get a taste of the atmosphere.
Democracy in action. 4 boxes for 4 questions in this COVID-era referendum. On Saturday, Taiwan voted on 4 issues that will impact the country's future energy supply, food safety, and the format of Taiwan's referendums themselves.
因为公投是人民用自己投票来决定公共政策，这是公投很重要。这是这几个案，包括能源，还有包括早教，还有包括食安健康，还有公投榜大选，这几个都是跟民众息息相关的公共议题，所以
Each question is clearly marked out by different coloured paper, in this vote taking place in the pandemic's shadow.
Here at a polling station in Neihu district in Taipei, people had shrugged off the cold and rainy weather to cast their ballots. This is the 3rd nationwide vote in Taiwan in as many years, and with concerns about the suppression of democracy on the rise in the region, today Taiwanese have been out around the country ensuring their voices are heard.
But throughout the day, concerns that those voices might be few. Some analysts predicted Saturday's voter turnout would not surpass 50%. That's compared to a turnout of 55% in the last referendum in 2018 and 74% in last year's presidential election. Some say that voter fatigue is now setting in.
就是希望可能议题前，就是希望都不要是假议题，议题前之类，可以先多一点讨论，然后确定是真的有需要公投的时候再拿出来做投票。
But for some voters, there's still uncertainty over how the government will respond to the results.
其实前面的选举，有些人认为说公投没有用，因为投了政府也不会做。可是我觉得无论如何，人民还是要把自己的想法给表达出来，不管有没有用。
Regardless of the outcome, by Saturday night, policymakers will have a clearer idea of what voters think about several key issues in this latest expression of Taiwan's democracy. Asnaya Zhou and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
One of Saturday's questions concerns a liquefied natural gas, or LNG, terminal on the coast of Taoyuan in Taiwan. And the government and the CPC Corporation, which is building the terminal, say it is vital to meet Taiwan's energy needs and transition away from coal. But it also threatens a rare algal reef. Reinhold Kilpatrick went to Taoyuan to find out more.
When retired schoolteacher Pan Zhongzheng began campaigning to preserve this natural wonder, he says few of the locals even knew it existed.
我们桃园27公里的藻礁是全球最特殊的浅海现生藻礁，这个生态系非常的丰富。光是藻礁的藻类我们发现到了27种，有9种是台湾特有种。这么特殊的地景和生态系，我们有义务要留给我们的下一代。
This once little-known reef is now the topic of a national referendum to decide whether to relocate a planned liquefied natural gas, or LNG, receiving terminal.
It might not look as eye-catching as a tropical coral reef,
But beneath these turbid, wind-blown waters is a marine ecosystem that activists and scientists say is even more rare and precious. And if this LNG receiving terminal is completed, they fear it could be lost forever. Pointing out the algae, crabs, and fish in the tidal pools, Teacher Pan, as he has become known to even the nation's top marine scientists, is in his element. For him, this is also a classroom for the next generation.
你到这个地方来，退潮，水退了，你就可以走进来，你就可以跟藻礁接触，然后藻礁里面有一个一个的小小的潮池，潮池里面就有很多的小动物，那你就可以在这里认识各种海洋的生物。台湾的西海岸剩下的自然海岸已经不多了，你看到的都是消波块啦，或者是做了那个海堤啊，那是非常可惜的事。一个海洋国家最后却没有办法去海洋去跟海水接近。
But the state-owned CPC Petroleum Corporation says they have drastically reduced the terminal's footprint and pushed it further offshore for the reef's protection.
Regarding the adverse impact, the construction or operation of this the LNG terminal might have on the Algal Reef ecosystem, CPC will put all our efforts into the monitoring and the preservation of the ecosystem. And by supplying the cleaner natural gas for the power generation, we hope that the air pollution and carbon dioxide emission can also be reduced. Otherwise, we might have only one choice: coal fire.
In pitting natural gas against dirty coal, the debate over Datan has divided environmentalists. Some have dropped their opposition to the terminal, satisfied with the new blueprints and keen to reduce the air pollution that kills thousands in Taiwan every year. But Pan says it's not that clean cut.
天然气接收站我们也知道，我们也认为它应该要做，但是它有替代的方案。但是藻礁你破坏了就没有。
However Taiwan votes on this question, it has already stirred a sea change in how the public looks at energy and the environment. Rick Yi and Ryan Hale-Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
As we saw in that report, Taiwan's energy needs were at the forefront of today's referendums. Another question asked whether a nuclear power plant should be unsealed and put into use to help power the country. Public opposition to nuclear power rose in the wake of the Fukushima disaster in Japan. But supporters of a yes vote say the plant is safe, and without it, Taiwan's future energy supply is threatened. Louise Watt has the story.
Marching for a no vote. Activists on a 30-hour walk to Taiwan's capital, calling on the public not to activate a controversial nuclear power plant. Their campaign started in Gongliao on the northeastern coast, the site of the island's fourth nuclear power plant, the focus of a divisive referendum. The divisions largely fall along party lines. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, is anti-nuclear. Nuclear energy is controversial in Taiwan because of a lack of long-term nuclear waste storage facilities and fears of an earthquake-triggered disaster, like in Japan in 2011. The opposition Kuomintang, or KMT, has urged people to vote yes to number 4. They say it would be a safe way of generating electricity. The fourth plant has been a contentious issue for years. In 2014, the KMT, which was in power, stopped its construction in the face of massive protests over perceived safety risks following Fukushima. In 2016, the DPP came to power, intent on phasing out nuclear power by 2025. 2 years later, voters in another referendum unexpectedly rejected that policy goal of a nuclear-free Taiwan. The fate of the fourth nuclear power plant is an especially heated issue in Gongliao, where it's located. Wu Wen-tong runs an electrical shop full of refrigerators, fans, and anti-nuclear posters. He's campaigned against the plant since its construction was first proposed more than 30 years ago. He shows me albums with photos of community meetings dating back to the 1980s.
后来的慢慢了解到不是只有经济的影响，反而对你的生活、对你的生命，甚至于对你的后代子孙都有长远性的影响。其实大家一直认为公投是最公平的一个公共议题的决定，但其实对共寮人来讲是不是的，因为它是一种在多数人的强迫之下，去给少数人居住的地方做一个不公不义的一个决定。
Opposition voices against the plant ring loud in this fishing town, with some residents even calling for divine intervention. But with the island's 3 other nuclear plants already being decommissioned or due to go offline by 2025, there is a bigger issue looming: Taiwan's future power supply. The nation imports 98% of its energy. Currently, most of its power is supplied by fossil fuels, including 30% from the burning of coal, a key contributor to air pollution and climate change. Renewables like wind and solar power have grown fast, but still account for less than 1%. Nuclear energy makes up about 7%. Wang Bohui, the former general manager of the 4th plant, dismisses the concerns over activating the facility. He says he has full confidence in its design and safety. He believes it could play an important role in Taiwan's development, and says its 2 units alone could supply as much as 10% of Taiwan's power.
台湾你要发展半导体，半导体是一个吃电的怪兽。那你假如说用这些电，完全用政府现在讲的，完全用再生能源 ，green， that's impossible. Because the green is based on the weather, okay? The weather in the daytime they have, but in the nighttime no.
But residents in the shadow of the plant aren't convinced that it's a strong enough argument to activate it.
30几年，我们刚开始知道在贡寮兴建核四的时候，那个时候的政府，那个时候的台电就讲说台湾会缺电，但是核四已经盖了差不多30年了，到现在台湾还没有缺电。
Whether the referendum opens the door to the plant going online or not, both sides agree on one thing: the decision will have repercussions for future generations. Alex Chen and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after break, on Referendum Day, we ask, is there such a thing as too much democracy? Stay with us.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus. For more great news from Taiwan and around the world, download the app Taiwan Plus.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Taiwan's Central Epidemic Command Center said it had identified a 5th imported case of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. It was found in a patient who was already in quarantine and had tested positive for the virus. The patient was inoculated with 2 shots of Moderna. As for Saturday's new numbers, health officials announced 13 imported cases and 0 domestic transmissions. The World Health Organization has approved a 9th vaccine for emergency use against COVID-19. The vaccine, named Covovax, was developed by the American company Novavax. It will be produced by the Serum Institute of India with the aim of giving lower-income countries more access to much-needed vaccine doses. Covovax does not use new mRNA technology, but relies on a traditional mechanism. Hong Kong goes to the polls on Sunday for its first Legislative Council election since Beijing drastically curtailed citizens' voting powers. The proportion of directly elected seats in the city's legislative body has plummeted from a little over half to around a fifth since Beijing overhauled Hong Kong's electoral system earlier this year. Anyone hoping to run must pass political screening by the newly established National Security Police. And now we continue our Referendum Day special. Taiwan is one of the world's highest consumers of pork per capita. Today, Taiwanese cast their vote on whether to reinstate a ban on pork imports treated with the additive Ractopamine. Opponents of Ractopamine worry about its safety, but Taiwan's governing party says allowing the imports simply brings Taiwan in line with international food safety standards. As Stream Chatter reports, pork is political.
Lawmakers wrestle each other to the ground in Taiwan's legislature late last year. But what was all the fuss about? Well, this. Pork. The brawl came after a decision by Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen in August last year to allow the import of pork treated with an additive called Ractopamine. Ractopamine enhances the leanness of animals and is widely used in the US. But due to food safety concerns, it is banned in China and the European Union. On Saturday, voters in Taiwan will decide whether they want to overturn Tsai's decision and implement a ban on pork products treated with the additive. It's a hot-button issue in Taiwan, where sensitivity to food safety is high.
It triggers much emotion, right? Fear, anger, sort of the desire to be healthy and also to protect our own families.
Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, argues that safety concerns over pork containing ractopamine are exaggerated. They say that allowing the import simply aligns Taiwan with international food and trading standards. But the opposition Kuomintang, or KMT, says that ractopamine can impact the health of certain groups, like pregnant women or children. They also argue that cheaper pork from overseas will undercut local producers. Around 90% of pork consumed in Taiwan is reared domestically.
在欧盟的部分，他们也没有开放这个东西进口，所以我觉得我们应该要再有更多的研究和讨论，才能够决定是不是要开放。那目前我觉得我们的做法是太过草率了一些，这样。
This is not the first time ractopamine has sent temperatures soaring in Taiwan. In 2012, farmers threw eggs at Taiwan's agricultural ministry after the KMT, who were then in power, said they would permit imports of beef treated with ractopamine. And that flip-flopping by the KMT and the DPP leads many to think the issue of ractopamine is more about politics than pork.
Taiwan's main political parties have traded places on the issue of ractopamine in meat products, and analysts say it's a clear indication of just how politicized the additive has become here. But this vote is not just about pig guts on the floor of Taiwan's parliament. There are concerns that if the ban on ractopamine-treated pork is passed, it could have a major impact on Taiwan's trading relationship with its most important partner, the United States.
Taiwanese American organizations have rallied in the run-up to the vote, calling on Taiwan to allow the imports. They say that if the ban passes, it could jeopardize TIFA, a trade agreement between the US and Taiwan, which has been mired by stops and starts.
好不容易 TIFA 可以开始重新再议，好不容易我们可以参加 CPTPP 这样子的一个让台湾可以进入国际舞台，一个让台湾的贸易可以重启贸易自由，能够在真的是说摆脱中国威胁的情况下，这种良机，这种对台湾未来的贸易前途的发展，阮台美人感觉非常非常的重要。
That's a position supported by the DPP, which has run a campaign suggesting a ban on pork containing ractopamine is tantamount to a ban on all US pork. They also say that if the vote passes, Taiwan could endanger its entry into trade organizations like the CPTPP. The opposition KMT argues that's disingenuous because the US is not a member of the CPTPP, and the vote is simply about banning the additive, not all US pork. And voters in Taiwan really care about pork. It's not only the most popular type of meat consumed here by far, but Taiwan is one of the highest per capita consumers of pork in the world. And because of that, people on both sides of the issue are hoping this referendum won't leave a sour taste in their mouth. Klein Wang and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
After months of hearing about today's referendums, some are warning of voter fatigue. Our reporter Rick Gloward asks if there's such a thing as too much democracy.
In just 3 years, Taiwanese people have voted in presidential, legislative, and local elections. They've even voted to recall politicians and in 10 referendums. With more polls around the corner, some citizens are growing weary of Taiwan's constant voting.
我觉得会麻烦，如果每年都有这么多公投的话，就蛮麻烦的，对。
So people have to think so many topics in one day. So I think, yeah, that's like overwhelming for citizens.
Still, local polls say as many as 75% of eligible voters may come out to vote on Saturday to cast their ballot.
Taiwan has one of the freest democracies in Asia. Its politics is often described as enthusiastic, raucous, or even freewheeling. But this latest round of referendums, bringing the total to 14 in just over 3 years, has raised questions about how the relationship between people and politics should work.
Taiwanese politicians are known for passionate and at times even violent debates inside the legislature. This year, yes-no votes on the 4 issues, pork imports, nuclear energy, saving an algal reef, and even the frequency of referendums, fall strictly down party lines. But Taiwan's 2 major parties have swapped sides on some of these issues over the last few years.
So in a sense, these issues on the ballot are not that important. Both parties use this opportunity to prepare for the next general election.
Both the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, and the opposition Kuomintang, or the KMT, have been frantically campaigning across the country in the last few weeks.
在野党有在野党的天职，我们必须要跟人民站在一起，尤其是面对这么阿把的民进党，我们必须要跟人民站在一起。
And what do the DPP think? At a last-minute rally, the party's Deputy Secretary-General said the KMT is using the referendums as a tool to challenge the ruling party, making these votes too much about party politics.
Initially, that we hope that the referendum should be a process that people can decide the national policy. But the reality is that when KMT rolls these agendas, those issues, then sadly we found that the nature of politics will change the whole referendum process.
Both experts and politicians say Taiwan, a young democracy finding its feet, still needs to perfect its public votes. But these referendums, along with all their theatrics, are in stark contrast to authoritarian China next door, which constantly threatens to invade democratic Taiwan.
We are not necessarily being a model or example for other countries, but our very success will prove that democracy will reign and dictatorship should not be the form of human beings.
For many people in Taiwan, unable to ignore the threat from across the water, they would still rather repeatedly head to the polls and have too much democracy than to have none at all. Damon Lin and Rick Glowert for TaiwanPlus.
Every year, indigenous children across Taiwan come together for a baseball tournament called the Care Cup. Our reporter Bing Wang is in Hualien to show us how baseball is a key part of life in Taiwan's indigenous communities.
Welcome to a very chilly day 3 of the Care Cup tournament. And today we're going to take a very special look at one of the very special events here at the tournament, the baseball classrooms. Now, many professional baseball players will hold training camps after the games so the young players can learn more from them and to learn more about baseball skills and to ask them about life advice in general. Let's take a closer look.
接球，往前，往前啊，往前，往前，接球，接球。
为什么你会喜欢打棒球？
为什么会喜欢打棒球？因为棒球可以改变我的人生。真的，我没有在变呐。
And as you can see, the kids love it because they not only get to meet the idols and ask them questions, but they also get to pick up some tricks along the way. Now, many of the professional baseball players, they played in the Care Cup when they were younger, and they were in the exact same position 10 to 15 years ago. And someday, these kids will be in the same position, and the cycle will continue.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.